What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be coming to you guys with a few predictions that I have for The Bad Batch, which, as you guys are watching, this is probably about 36 hours from release, and the first episode is actually confirmed to be 70 minutes long, followed by another episode on Friday, and so it's obviously a very exciting time ahead for us Star Wars fans. I thought it would be a fun idea to essentially just take a few guesses at what I think is going to happen throughout the show, and you guys can leave your own predictions down in the comments as well, and then we can all come back at the end of the season and see how well we did compared to each other and see who got the most predictions right. So after the final episode, I'll essentially make a recap of this video and compare notes on what I got right and wrong. What I'm also going to do for a bit of a fun little competition is that in the recap video at the end of the season, I'm going to go back to the comments of this video and see who was the most accurate with their predictions or who guessed something absolutely wild that no one predicted, and I'll give that comment a shout out on the recap video to let everyone know which of you guys were the most accurate. Now in this video, I'm going to be making 3 predictions about the actual story side of things, or just sort of stuff that happens throughout the show, and then I'm also going to be making 7 predictions of some cameos that we might see in the show as well. Obviously these are just random guesses for the most part, or I guess educated guesses just going off the era of the show and stuff like that, so I'm almost certain that I'll probably be wrong on all of these knowing my luck, but I thought it would be fun to just see if I can actually get any of these right and gain some bragging rights by the end of the season. Now before we get into the predictions as well, I did just want to let you guys know what's going to be coming up on the channel in the next few months while The Bad Batch is being released. Obviously, I've always done mainly gaming content on this channel while also adding just some regular Star Wars content since the start of this year, but whenever there are shows or movies on the way, I am going to be putting a lot of focus into that content, so you guys can expect a ton of Bad Batch content on the way over the next few months. They've confirmed that there is at least 14 episodes, and my guess is that it will actually be longer than that, and each week I'm going to be doing episode reviews of every single episode, and even just some additional videos on anything specific that happens throughout the show if it does deserve its own video. So yeah, if you guys are excited for The Bad Batch, then definitely be sure to turn on those notifications, as this channel is going to be heavily focused on The Bad Batch over the next few months. But anyway, that's enough of that, guys. Let's get stuck right into these predictions. So the first prediction I have, which is one that I think a lot of other people probably have as well, is that I think Crosshair is going to defect from Clone Force 99 and become an agent of the Empire, tasked with actually tracking down his brothers, and I think that will be a large part of the storyline that we see in this series. When I was watching the trailer that came out at the end of March, I realised pretty quickly that Crosshair just wasn't in a lot of the scenes where it shows all of the other members of the Bad Batch together. He was in the trailer multiple times, and there are also sections where they are all together, but there were just way too many segments of the trailer where it showed Tech, Echo, Hunter and Wrecker all together, while Crosshair was actually nowhere to be seen. Tons of people have noticed this as well, so it's not like this is some crazy prediction. Honestly, it does spell it out pretty clearly in the trailers that he might not be quite as predominant of a character as expected, but there are endless reasons as to why that is, so it's definitely not a given just yet either. I think there's a good chance he could also just sort of die sacrificing himself to save the rest of the team, or just simply die in battle or something, or even be captured as the Empire clearly after the Bad Batch, as Tarkin mentions in the trailer. But personally, I think it's more likely that he does actually become a traitor to the Bad Batch, which I think would be pretty awesome for the storyline, so I'm definitely down for that if it does end up happening. Now, all of that being said, and I am going to stick with that prediction, Star Wars is notorious for throwing off their fans in trailers and making stuff look a certain way only to essentially just be distracting in the trailers. So as much as I do think it could definitely happen, I also think it could just be a ruse from the showrunners to give us some false hints, but either way I will stick with the prediction that I think he will defect from the Bad Batch. Now, the next prediction I'm going to make is that Omega, the young clone that we see in the trailer, is going to be special in one way or another, which is a bit of a broad statement, I know, but I think there is going to be more to her than we know. A lot of people are saying that she's just the last clone, or at least part of the last batch of clones anyway, since Omega is the final letter in the Greek alphabet, and it's often used as a symbol that Alpha refers to the first of something and Omega refers to the last of something. And while that could definitely be true, and to be honest it likely is true, I don't think that's all there is to her. Obviously, she is a female clone, which we've not seen before in Star Wars, so that alone makes her special in a way. But I think much the same as the Bad Batch members all having their own strengths and sort of specific skills that they excel in, I think Omega will have her own specific skill as well, which is what will make her unique and special compared to just the regular clones. A lot of people have theorised that she could be Force sensitive, and I do think that that's a pretty good chance of happening too. Not quite enough that I'm willing to make that my prediction, but I'm definitely not going to write it off either. For me though, I just think she's probably some sort of defective clone in the same way that the rest of the Bad Batch are. She knows them all by name, and that makes me think that she essentially looks up to them since they're sort of similar to her in that way. Or, and this requires a little bit of a tinfoil hat, but that could even be her unique ability, having maybe a genetically enhanced brain or something to where she's just really smart and wise despite her her age, making her strength to be her smarts rather than any physical enhancement like the rest of the Bad Batch. I'm not 100% sure on what the go is with Omega, but I definitely think there is something more than meets the eye. Now, my final prediction for the show is that I think the reason the first episode is so long is because it's going to take place during Order 66, pretty much lining it up perfectly with the Siege of Mandalore arc at the end of Season 7 of the Clone Wars. The reason I say this is because we see the Bad Batch fighting B-1 battle droids during the trailer, and we all know that the droid army was ordered to be terminated during Revenge of the Sith, and so it does seem a little bit odd that there are still battle droids, since it seems like the rest of the show will actually have the clones as the enemies, as once again we see Tarkin pretty much ordering the clones to hunt down Clone Force 99. It's been said that the show takes place after Revenge of the Sith, but my prediction is that the first episode will actually set it all up by actually showing Order 66. There are going to be a ton of people who are maybe seeing this as one of their first pieces of Star Wars media, and so I think it will need some level of explanation as to why the Bad Batch are clones, but they're not the bad guys like the rest of the clones will be in the show. And I am definitely keen to see some other sides to Order 66 like we saw in the Siege of Mandalore arc, since it's such an interesting period in Star Wars history, and I definitely love seeing it from all different angles and seeing just how differently everyone feels about it. Now, that is it for the bigger, sort of beefier predictions, and now I wanted to move on to my cameo predictions for the show, as I think there are going to be a ton of different cameos throughout the Bad Batch. We already see Tarkin, Rex, Saw Gerrera, Fennec Shand, and even a few other familiar faces in the trailer alone, but I do think that there will be many more than that, especially since the season does seem like it will be pretty long. My first cameo prediction, which actually relates to Fennec Shand, is that I think we will see Boba Fett at some point throughout the show, maybe setting up his relationship with Fennec, or just slightly touching on it at least, as he is obviously a fan favourite character, and I think leading into his own show later this year, they probably want to sort of show him off a little bit and give him a bit of a cameo, so that later on when there's a new show called The Book of Boba Fett, then any newer fans might recognise that name from the Bad Batch and be much more excited to watch the show. The next cameo prediction I have is that I think we will see Hondo Ohnaka once again. He's obviously become another fan favourite and seems to just pop up everywhere in Star Wars these days, and seeing as he's in both the Clone Wars and Rebels, it just seems right to once again see him in the next animated show. My guess is that obviously being a pirate, he maybe helps at one point with smuggling the Bad Batch out of a tricky situation or something along the lines of that. I don't think he'll really be a huge part of the show, but I honestly will be pretty surprised if we don't even see him just for a few minutes. Another prediction I have is that I think we could see Ahsoka yet again, most likely just for a very brief period, as I don't think they really want her to steal the show, but just like Hondo, it would kind of feel weird if she wasn't a part of the show, and with Filoni being an executive producer on the show, it just seems likely since he obviously loves to include Ahsoka wherever possible, so I'm not 100% sold on this one just yet, but I do think it is pretty likely. The next prediction I have, which is maybe a little bit left field, is that I think we might see some Inquisitors or even Purge Troopers in the show, possibly being tasked with hunting down the Bad Batch, since I doubt the regular clones are going to be able to do a thing when it comes to killing or capturing Clone Force 99. Obviously, Inquisitors and Purge Troopers are almost exclusively tasked with hunting down Jedi, and with the Bad Batch not being Jedi, that does seem somewhat unlikely, but Tarkin himself says in the trailer that these 5 soldiers are essentially stronger than an army, and because of that I honestly think there's a good chance that we might see some more, skilled and highly trained soldiers to deal with the Bad Batch, and the first thing that comes to mind are the Inquisitors and even Purge Troopers that we see in Fallen Order. Now, speaking of Tarkin, another somewhat similar character is Director Krennic, and I think there is a good chance that we could actually see him very briefly in the show, as he was tasked with directing the production of the Death Star, and even though he's not a super well-known character in Star Wars, he was very high in the ranks within the Empire, which is seen in multiple different novels, mostly Catalyst and Thrawn Treason. Now, Krennic and Tarkin did have a relationship outside of what we saw in Rogue One. They were essentially rivals for years before that whole drama with Tarkin taking over the reins of the Death Star, and although this one is probably much less likely than some of the others, I just get a feeling that they could include Krennic even just briefly at some point throughout the show. The next prediction I have is one that is probably a bit more realistic, and that is Mon Mothma. Obviously, Mon Mothma is always kind of shown in any of the early Rebellion scenes. She's a very familiar face, and she would make sense to appear in this show since it seems like the Bad Batch are going to defect from the Empire very early on, and I'm assuming since they come in contact with Saw Gerrera, that they could join the Rebel cause pretty early within the series. I think if they do decide to join the Rebels and fight back against the Empire, then it would make a lot of sense to see Mon Mothma, since, like I said, she's kind of always just appeared in those type of scenes, and so she is another one that I'm definitely expecting to see at some point. point. Now, the very last prediction I have, and definitely not the least, is that I think we will see Vader more than once throughout the show. We see Palpatine in the trailer, we see Tarkin, and I think there's a good chance that they will show my boy Vader in the very early days after Order 66, which I think would be pretty cool to see. We obviously saw him at the end of Season 7, which makes this seem all the more likely. I'm not sure he'll be in it, very regularly or as a main focus or anything, but I'd be surprised if we don't see him at least once throughout the course of the series. So, those are my 10 predictions for the Bad Batch, guys. Knowing my luck, not a single one of these will end up being correct, but I definitely do feel pretty confident about a lot of them, and I'm very keen to come back with a recap at the end of the season and see just how many of these I managed to get right. Leave your own predictions down in the comments section as well, guys. I'm very keen to hear what everyone thinks is going to happen or who you guys think we'll see throughout the show. And like I said, once the season is over, I'll come back to the comments of this video and find out who got the most predictions right, and I'll give that comment a shout out on the recap video, almost like a little competition to see who was the most accurate with their predictions. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Crosshair.